how does Julia reflect on the rise of AI as an aid for teaching future generations of data science students? Can AI, in your view, Julia, either be a force for good in teaching students how to code, or do you think that AI poses a threat to properly teaching or mentoring future data science students and leaders?
Yeah, this is a really great question. And I have my use of like LLM based tools, which so I'm going to be a little specific because AI is one of those words like what on earth does it mean? What on earth does it mean? So, when I have used LLM based tools for code assistance, I feel like it has overall helped me. And I think that it's partly because of when it has come in my life and also partly of how I have used it. So if I were to say use Copilot or one of the alternatives to Copilot, it is most helpful to me when I am trying to do something in a language I am a little bit less familiar with. So I would say, in terms of my own background, these days I write a lot of TypeScript. I write a little bit of Rust. I write a little bit of Python. I write a medium amount of R. I write a lot of YAML. But anyway, I and a big proportion of those languages are not languages I have used my whole life, or even like 10 years. Like I've used them, so a good proportion of those I've used less than 10 years. And so if I know what I want to do and I can't remember syntax for how to do it in a certain language, that's actually been quite helpful for me. If I am doing R, like especially if I'm like writing EDA, tidyverse EDA code for R, I am faster than the prompts, and I feel like it gets in my way, and I'm like, like this is so frustrating because that's where, like, if I would say what am I most productive at, like what am my expertise where is the highest, like that's probably what I am the fastest at writing. And I think that's partly because those tools are so well designed, like the tidyverse is so well designed that it's a really good fit for how I think about data and analyzing data. So that's an example where I'm like, I don't actually find it that helpful in my strongest competency. I find it quite helpful in my slightly where I'm still like I'm a little bit slower. I would maybe have to look something up. Like it is quite helpful in that area. Now let's talk about teaching. Let's talk about teaching. I don't know that it would be that helpful in the long run for a learner to use it when they're learning their first language. I think that it may, because you maybe don't have the ability to evaluate as much. It spits something out and you're like, is this good or bad? I don't know. So I don't know that it's so useful for someone trying to get competence with their first language. I think there are some real, like, how can it, like, what's an effective or good use in a learning environment, and also, like, what do we want someone to learn? We maybe I could envision someone like teaching a class where it's like, hey, we're going to learn to code in Python, and you all have one of these. One of these things installed. Okay, write a comment that says, I don't know, let's picture a very intro class. Write a comment that says, write a for loop that does like blah, blah, blah. And then it'll pop up the thing. And maybe someone could teach saying, look at it, read it, predict what will happen when you run it, and then do that. So I think it's possible to use these in teaching environments that are going to be good. Because of my own background, it's a little hard for me to envision it being really useful for a learner of a first language. I see tons of people around me using those tools really useful for additional languages. Okay, now that was all about code, right? What about other uses? What about other uses? I have not had great experience with using these tools in other uses. Like if I try to have it write something for me, I hate the voice that it's written in. I'm like, oh, I hate it. Like, no, that doesn't sound like me at
Yeah.
all. That sounds like this sort of gross, like machine, like they all have this kind of voice, when they're like generating text prose, when they're generating prose, and I like hate it. I'm like, no way would I send an email that says that. That's ridiculous. So I've had less luck with it in text generation outside of code. I've had pretty
Mhm.
good experiences with them text generation in code. I think it will take some real thoughtful educational people to think about how do we use these in really helpful ways to help people get the real skills. I mean, the real skills when it comes to code is not writing syntax, right? Like that's kind of almost what gets in the way. And if we can use, like, can these tools help us solve that? Maybe, maybe. So I would say, like, overall, I put myself in the, like, I'm not like morally opposed to these tools. Although, of course, there are all kinds of questions around the data that was used and that have trained them, the licensing. Like, there are some complicated issues, but I would not say I am by principle opposed to them. I have had using them in some ways. I'm kind of skeptical about how they are used broadly. And of course like the fact that it can just generate these can just generate unlimited amounts of text, and then we can just like put all that text on the internet. Like, there are some real like are we going into a information where like we cannot find good information because there's too much literally text
Mhm,
being generated that's poor
mhm.
quality? Very interesting questions. I'm not someone who feels like I have the answers. I certainly have opinions based on my own experiences of playing around with them.